In conversation with Barbara Elle. Barbara Elle fell in love with reading and writing stories from a young age. She published Dealt in Vermilion and Dealt in Smoke, a psychological mysteries on Amazon. The five-star review includes, read this author if you want suspense until the very end, and I really love this mystery. The pacing was just perfect. She enjoys a rewarding career as a clinical audiologist with a master's from Columbia University. In her personal life, Barbara Hale loves traveling with her musician husband, the bass player in the iconic Cyndi Lauper band. She has explored a Buddhist temple in Beijing crypts in Vienna and the Kabuki Theater in Tokyo, collecting characters and experiences. Death in Cerulean, Book 3, The Cape Mysteries, scheduled for publication in 2025. And on today's episode of Photo Interview, it's my utmost pleasure, joy and excitement to have on the show today Barbara Hell and Cindy Breck co-hosting me in the conversation. Welcome on the show, Barbara.
Thanks so much. It's great to meet both of you.
It's nice to meet you too.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure, really, having you on the show. Quite exciting having you today. Having read and check up some of your amazing works on Amazon. I'm excited. We're here to have a conversation around it. Thanks for coming on.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Barbara, I need to
Well,
first say that I found the description page of a psychological thriller in the name of Death in Vermilion, a gripping psychological mystery full of twist, which is the first book actually in the Cape Mysteries book series. To be quite
yes.
amazing, quite compelling, and wonderful on Amazon. Now, I wanted to ask you the most obvious questions most authors get asked. What inspired you to write this book? How does Death in Vermilion come to be?
My inspiration for this particular book, and this is book one in the series,
Mm,
here it is. Oops, Death in Vermilion. I had a great artist I worked with.
yeah.
And it's an interesting story. My friend, my good friend, is a wonderful artist, and she works in a cooperative like my main character. And she was she was telling me stories about the other artists in her building who are always complaining and and leaving each other sticky notes in the bathroom and in other places about how the other artists didn't empty the wastebasket in the bathroom or
Mm,
clean the sink, and one of them actually thinks that a paintbrush was stolen from her by another artist.
wow.
And obviously, nobody liked this artist. And I thought, what would happen if one of the artists in this cooperative was murdered? So that was the actual inspiration for Death in Vermilion.
Well, you crafted a story around artists,
Correct.
and it's kind of interesting revolving around the trash can and what might transpire with them not appreciating things. Kind of interesting. Okay, so I know that through some research, I found that you're a health professional, an audiologist. And
Yes.
I was curious about how does being an audiologist influence you as a writer?
Well, being a good audiologist is somewhat like being a good writer. Both of those things, being a good writer also requires listening carefully to people, and I have to listen. I
Yeah.
do listen to patients. I look at their body language. I ask them about their backstories, and all of these are skills I developed as an audiologist, but I think it helps me define my characters because and sometimes the actual characters are based on my patients or people in my life, and I'm pretty sure that most artists do this, and it's based on my own life too.
That's interesting. It's very interesting.
Yes.
That's actually very amazing to know. Oh, thanks for sharing. Now, Barbara, just for the sake of the would-be reader, could you tell us about some of the themes we had expect when picking up Death in Vermilion? Also, which mystery authors influenced you the most? I think I've got two questions in there already.
Yes. All right, I'll answer the first one. That my main character, Lila Goodfriend, is an artist and amateur director. And I thought about how her curiosity and intuition artists and their obsessions. The second book, one of the themes is Native American culture, and I explore theme, and the main characters has a lot of difficulty with commitment and trust. When it comes to the other main character, who is a detective and is also her love interest and works with her on solving mysteries. So I'd say those through my 3 mysteries.
That's quite interesting. Yeah.
I would definitely agree. Barbara, you have the follow-up series to Death in Vermilion, which is Death and Smoke, which they're both part of the Cape Mystery series. Could you tell us what inspired you on the Death and Smoke?
Yes, my inspiration was actually a visual. Before I started writing any of it, of a dead body who's buried in a snowbank. And it relates to one of the first scenes where Lila is on a creative retreat with her fellow artists, and there's a big snowstorm, and the next morning Lila goes on a walk by herself because she actually just wants some alone time. And as she's walking through the woods, she comes across a huge snowbank and a trail of blood. And because of that trail of blood, she starts to unearth this snowbank. And as she does it and unearths the body, she realizes that she knows the person who is buried in this snowbank. So that leads to the plot of Death and Smoke. And also, that leads to her digging into this snowbank and knowing who's dead. And then even though she's kind of a reluctant amateur detective, she starts to understand, she seeks to know how she was killed.
I don't think I'd want to figure out who that was in that ice. No, that snowbank. Knowing that it's your friend or someone that that's intensifying.
Right. It's not actually her friend, but there are markers. When she does it, she's very observant as an artist, and she notices tattoos on the body and and just is able to identify this body. As an artist too, she's very attuned to people's posture and also what makes them an individual. So that was actually the beginning of Death and Smoke. That's also a book that's on Amazon. Here it is.
Okay.
Death and Smoke.
Beautiful.
Beautiful cover you've even got in there.
Yes. I used the same artist who's British. I mean, artists do that. Now you can work with people all over the world. The tech on my website lives out west. So it's great to collaborate with people, and you don't even have to, you meet them as I'm meeting you over the internet.
Yeah.
So it was a visual
Absolutely.
that came to me.
One of the people I feel it's very important to make good use of social media. It has been created to use it to our own advantage and, spread the news about works. Thanks for sharing.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bara, one of the most interesting things to me as a writer is to listen to readers' feedbacks. And you may want to agree with me that one of the things that makes literature to be complex is the fact that it can be interpreted in different ways by different readers based on their opinions and perceptions. And sometimes the readers might get the message intended by the author. Sometimes they might not get the message. Sometimes they might be close to getting the message. And at times they might hilariously misunderstand the message and interpret it upside down. As interestingly fun as they sound, I would like to ask you, how do you feel when readers interpret your work differently than you intended? How does that make you feel?
I like that. I mean, it talks to the complexity of my characters. It talks to the complexity, the characters, the female characters that are the focus of my writing. I and I'm very interested in creating complex and relatable characters, writing realistic dialogue.
Yeah.
A lot of my characters, they are friends and even sisters, and and I like to say, after all, it is a woman's world, and that is what I'm basically writing about. So maybe that's why people feel that they, someone wrote in her review that she thought I was a new mystery writer and that this was a new genre. But I'm not so sure it's a new genre. But it is very much about female characters, and maybe that's what they were alluding to.
I think it's actually a fountain, really, to listen to readers' feedback. Because sometimes, and this is one of the things that makes book reviews and book club meetings they quite fun. The way where you can have like 8 people or 10 people come together to talk about a book, and the way the first reader would interpret it would differ from the way the second reader would interpret it, differ from the third, fourth, fifth. And we tend to interpret books based on our own perception and how we can relate to the story ourselves. So I think it's a fun thing, really.
They're very different, all my characters, and I establish the other artists in my first book, and then in my second book, these same characters appear, the same group of artists that are in the cooperative that Lila works at. And relationships aren't always easy.
Yeah.
And some of the reviewers picked up on that and said she was very interested in how the characters interacted. And that I see is very positive.
That's most definitely positive. It really is. On your website, you actually have something of a review that I thought was kind of interesting. It says, "A new mystery writer, a new genre, really?" What do you actually mean by that?
Well, it was very flattering, but I'm not sure this is a new genre, so to speak. But she may have been alluding to the fact that female writers are my focus of writing, that they're relatable, that I write realistic dialogue between them. As I said, they're friends, they're sisters, I have 2 sisters, so I suppose I like to explore those relationships. And so those are probably the reason that this particular reviewer called it a new genre. A lot of books, and also that they're women of a certain age. Many books write about girls, and the names, it says it in their titles, Girl in a Train, those girl books, I call them. Yeah. Whereas mine, they're women of a certain age, and I think that's relatable for a lot of my readers, that they're not girls, they're women.
Oh wow, these are great subject lines you've got in here. Very great subject lines.
Great. I'm glad you feel that way.
I was also curious too. Are there any characters within your story that you favor most, like in Death of Vermilion and Death in Smoke? Is there one character that you just really feel connected with?
Yeah, my main character, Lila, good friend, her skepticism, her desire to follow a line of inquiry, sort of her persistence, which is one of my character traits. I think writers need that in order to continue to write. And just being able to create characters. I do relate to my main character. Sometimes I'm kind of snarky, so I have another character who is kind of snarky, and other ones who are, just kind of like a friend,
Mhm.
It's based a fair amount on the woman I mentioned in the beginning,
Yeah.
who is also my inspiration for my main character, which she's very happy to tell a lot of friends. Oh, I'm the main character in Barbara Elle's book.
I
So
noticed I noticed Barbara there when I asked you that question, you really perked up, like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
came alive when you started talking about
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you can tell you have an
I
intimate
noticed that
connection with
too.
that.
yes,
Yeah.
I love my characters, all of them. And they're so different when you read the books. They mostly appear in 1 and 2, not so much in the third book, which is yet to be published, Death in
Wow.
Cerulean. So, which more is about Lila and the love interest and detective in the story. And she works with him solving mysteries
Mm.
as an amateur detective. And his name is Detective Grace, and then he becomes her love interest. So
Wow.
very slowly, but I think that can happen in real life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's very great, really. I love your take on this, and I love your answers to these questions. They're quite impressive, quite fun, and very great. And I would like us to talk about how you get your inspirations and ideas. Because for someone who has written different novels like you, I'm always surprised by how novelists like yourself would sit down and craft long sentences and bring words together in a way that sentence makes paragraph, makes pages, makes chapters, and makes an amazing trunkload of voluminous novel like you've just shown to the camera in each alley. And this always leaves me thinking, how exactly were they able to pull these words together, this sentence rolling into another one, the story transitioning beautifully from one part to another in a smooth manner? And as far as writing is concerned, I'd like to ask you, how do you get the inspirations and ideas to write your books? Where did they come from? I'm curious.
Well, the first one came from my friend, thinking these artists sort of want to kill each other. The second one came from this visual. This last one, the Death in Cerulean, the comes from a vacation on a Caribbean island. I wanted to take her to a new place, and places are very intimate with my work, and my inspirations. I really love certain authors, and I love their use of words. And right now, I read a lot. I read every book in the British author's Slow Horses series, and it's also on TV. I find him to be the his mysteries to be kind of off kilter with a lot of humor, and I do try to incorporate a lot of humor in my books. And the other ones that I really love are Scandinavian noir writers, like Henry Mankell. I'm not sure. I love the noir because they always write about deeply flawed characters, which they're not perfect people. It's not glamorous. It's down to earth. And that's what my characters are like. And also, they write about a sense of place
Yeah.
frequently. In Norway. They're in a lot of Scandinavian countries, and that becomes part of the backdrop of their novels. And I change places because it is intimate. It is an inspiration for me as I wrote these books.
Wow.
So you're currently working on the third book, which, if I caught you correctly, it was called Death in Cerulean.
Cerulean, yes. And I'm
Okay.
nearly done with it. And within a month or two, I should be publishing it after I go through the process of editing. And I have a few readers who read it before just in case there are things that are loose ends, or they don't quite get something, like they don't get like my red herrings and how the plot is interwoven. It's very important to me to sort of try to mislead my readers, and at the same time you have to plant red herrings.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the readers pick up on that and they want to know the outcome of your book. The third one takes place actually on a Caribbean island and has a lot to do with that Caribbean island. There's a cold case that she tracks down in the second book. In the third book, she is tracking down. She gets embroiled. Again, she's kind of reluctant in the Caribbean island, in its history, its and how it's murders that have happened over time. And then realistically, my husband and I were on a particular island, and an intricate part of the plot, I'm a scuba diver, is the technical part of scuba diving, and I write about that a lot. And my first reader said he actually found all the information about scuba diving really interesting without being overwhelming for the readers. So I write about this Caribbean island, about corruption, about murder on the island. So that place interested me.
Yeah, you definitely have a correlating theme with all three books with the death and stuff like that.
Yes.
But
That's great, really. That's great. I love your answers to this question, Barbara. They're quite great and quite amazing. Thank you so much for taking your time to share them. Thank you. And now, following publication, what was the fun thing you loved most about being a writer? And what's the most challenging experience you've had as a writer as well? The fun thing and the most challenging. The good, the bad, perhaps.
Well, the thing I really love, which is intrinsic to all my books, is research. I really love finding out backgrounds for the stories. In the first book, Death in Vermilion, I researched paints, and I actually went to a paint factory in upstate New York and learned a lot. Wow. And so I like to be versed in the things that I'm writing about. Of course, I have a friend who's an artist, and I drew a lot on what she would tell me as an artist. In my second book, I went and I learned a lot more about Native American cultures. I read books. I went to exhibits. It also led me to going to casinos and having a husband who's a touring musician. I've been to a lot of casinos, and those things are part of the plot of the book and part of the background of the book. In this last one, I researched the history of the island, politics, and ecological issues. I can almost call this an eco-thriller. Sort of a new category of mysteries. Wow. And also technical scuba diving, because I'm a diver and I was on the islands scuba diving quite a few years ago. Wow. I find, and I guess this is part of my advice, is the more I learn, the more I can draw from when I sit down and write a book.
Almost make it kind of come alive a lot more because you're experiencing parts of the aspect through the research process.
Exactly. And that's why I can talk about the history and corruptions on islands, specifically on the island I'm writing about, because I visited there. But I did read a lot about the corruption on the island, and it's a real thing. Yeah. I like to write about reality and weave that through my books.
I love your take on that. Very beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, as a published author, and I know you've got 2 books out and you've got another one coming out here in a couple months. What sort of advice could you give writers that are struggling with publishing a book? And where can we actually find this upcoming book in these 2 books that you've got now?
I publish on Amazon. I do some of and I mostly do some of the technical uploading. I'm sort of a techie, and I had to be in my career because I was dealing with technical instruments, working on a computer. So I'm comfortable with those things and comfortable about building websites. And, as I said, the more I learn about this, the more I can, when I sit down and write. So my best advice would be to research, also to be authentic when you go to write a book. Let it reflect who you are and your interests. Always write. We do that. If you don't do that, you won't get to the end of your book. And revise a lot, revise. Finally, while you're finding out about, while you're doing research, write about the things you love, the places you love, and that will help and inspire you to really write books, which is a process I'm sure other people have said to you can be is very by yourself. But you can also reach out. When you reach out to people who help you with the book, you get to know these people very well and their ideas. I always work with people and I say, please inspire me with your ideas. When my website was built, I worked with a woman who ultimately moved away back to her home on an island. And my website, I sort of gave her free rein, and it's quite my new person I'm collaborating with, who's out in Colorado. She was able to come up with some great ideas and great ways to incorporate new ideas, because everything is sort of a living being. Your website is a living being, and it has to change as you write new books. And as I said, I give a sneak peek of Death in Cerulean, the next one that's coming. I put up a chapter called Submerged on my website, and you can actually go to my website, barbaraelle.com, and read this chapter, and also sign up for my mailing list so you know more about what's coming. I'll when you're on my mailing list, not only did you get a sneak peek, I can give you insights into all my books and, really reach out to my readers. It's ultimately, for me, it's about loving your books, but also writing what you love, but also reaching readers.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if we don't write what we love, then we're not going to finish the book. You're right about that.
Absolutely.
It's very important.
Right. So that's my best advice. Maybe other writers have alluded to the same part of their process, to continue to write all the time as much as you can. I actually have a funny way that I make myself write, which is I actually schedule writing. It might be in the morning, it might be in the evening. I constantly have my phone with me, so I'm always writing notes in my phone, something someone says, a look that they gave, just anything that I can later on incorporate with my writing and find inspirational. I also in Word write out very careful outlines of my books, so I have something to travel. I guess in some ways you could call me seat of the pants, but in other ways I'm what's called a plotter, by looking forward in my book and creating scenes, and then writing about each scene and what they will be.
Yeah, there's three styles of writers: the pantser, plotter, but there's the planter. Also, you sound like you're that mid between there. You kind of do a hybrid method.
Yes, I do. Between plotting and what you mentioned, which is looking forward and planting the idea early in the book. I had another published writer who I was talking to, who said when you use something later on, you should plant the seed of it in the beginning of the book so it does seem realistic and they recognize it and they can believe in it. You know, I have a helicopter scene at the end of the book, so he suggested doing the scene in the beginning where I plant a helicopter, whose it is, and, you know, have other people comment on it in this particular scene. So later on, when I have that helicopter come back, it's no surprise to them. You know, it doesn't, they understand why it's in there.
That's amazing.
I think it's really important that English literature, the readers get to understand where they can find your book at. So I don't want to miss that point.
Oh, it's Amazon. Both books are there. They're there with extensive blurbs, so they can read that, and reviews, so they can see what other readers thought. And then on my website, it also gives you the chance to buy the book, as well as if you land on Amazon, so that readers can, if what I've said motivates them to take a look at my books, they can go to my website, they can go to Amazon and put in the titles of the 2 published books that I talked about, which is Death in Vermilion and Death in Smoke. And on my mailing list, you'll find out more about when the 3rd one is coming out, maybe sneak peek about the 4th book.
Yeah.
Ooh,
So I really try to get the readers involved in my process.
That's interesting. That's amazing. And I left a link in the discussion part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of Barbara Elle books directly on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, on our website, and also another platform. I also left a link to our social media pages for possible followings. So thank you so much, Barbara, for accepting the invitation to be featured on P English Literature. I must say this is more than awesome. Very great, quite exciting, having this lovely conversation with you around the beautiful works. Thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you so much, Peter and Cyndi. I'm really excited that you're interested in my books and were able to give me this time to talk about my books and my process and the importance of readers. I mean, that's who I do this for, too. I think most writers feel compelled to write, and in the process really discover something about themselves.
Yeah.
It was very nice meeting you.
Great meeting both of you.